Hello everyone. Well, one of my long-term goals, and to be honest, one of my last real hardware goals has been completed. I finally finished my X68000 MIDI setup. About 1,000,000 wires, and I need to figure out a way to get it, nice and clean and organized. But everything's up and working. Alright, so, for those of you who aren't familiar, the X68000 internally has an FM synthesis chip, and it's a very, very awesome FM chip. But, in order to give crystal clear quality and more instrumental and less FM, quite a few games, in fact the majority of them, also support the use of MIDI synthesizers. Now, the system itself doesn't come equipped for this, so what you need, not only do you need an X68000, but you need a MIDI interface card, which, I've got mine here. And there's several versions. I have one of the ones that uses the computer port, which is actually, it's MIDI-DIN 5. And then you need an adapter cable from MIDI-DIN 5 to standard DIN 5, which is the MIDI standard, which I actually got really freaking lucky because my card didn't come with any cables. And originally my plan, when I went at the hard off, I was hoping just to find some kind of cable with a MIDI-DIN 5 on it that I could splice together from a normal MIDI cable, until I ordered the parts and got some, new jacks and new plugs so I could make a nice adapter cable. But by some miracle, I dug for a box and I actually found one that had a MIDI-DIN 5 and a standard DIN 5 socket, and I was like, no way. And it actually works 100%. So I didn't have to make a damn cable, which is beautiful. So that goes from the MIDI output to the MIDI. And then of course, since, if you think of, for example, a computer running DOS, if you were playing Doom on a 486, most likely you were using a Sound Blaster. That had the MIDI synthesizer chip on it. So all you had to do was select it for your music and it went to your output. But the X68000 doesn't have that, so you use MIDI cables and you send it to a MIDI synthesizer module. I personally use my good old trusty Roland CM500, which it's kind of an ugly looking thing, very simple. Just volume, power, and in the back there's a selector switch. Alright, as far as the X68000 games go, the older games, and most games in general, tend to support the MT32 or CM32. They're pretty much the same thing. Which is a rather famous, rather popular synthesizer module. And then, but as time went on, they added support for higher end synthesizers. For example, Solfeis supports the MT32, but it also supports the CM64, I believe. And as time went on again, and Roland released the GS with the famous SC55, a lot of games supported that as well. Now, the one thing I love about the CM500 is that it's essentially a CM32, CM64, SC55, all in one unit. In fact, I had a feeling Roland basically created the CM500 for the X68000 users, because all you gotta do is just flick the switch in the back. So basically, with this one module, I can pretty much listen to every variation of X68000 MIDI music. If you see some pictures of the old days, people will have literally a stack of synthesizers. They'll have 3 of them, so that they can use each variation. But with one of these little babies, you can actually use every single variation. At least for all the games I have so far, every single variation works. Of course, as far as the MIDI itself goes, some people prefer the internal. In my opinion, it depends on the game. Konami did some great stuff. Castlevania sounds awesome. It's got the internal FM, It's got MT32 and it's got SC55, and in my opinion, all three of them sound great. So it's just kind of whatever you feel the mood for. But then some games, like Phalanx, for example, sounds way, way better with the FM, in my opinion. The MIDI, well, if you're familiar with the Super Nintendo version of Phalanx, that soundtrack is based off the MT32 MIDI soundtrack, and it's just too weak. I much prefer the FM of Phalanx, but it depends on the game. And a lot of them, like Castlevania, it's worth listening to all of them. Just whatever you're in the mood for. So to recap so far, so you need your computer, you need the MIDI interface card, you need an adapter cable. Unless you do have there is one version of the MIDI card that uses standard MIDI ports, though I've heard you get some noise issues with those, so I've actually heard the computer port ones are better. But anyway, you need your adapter cable if you're using that, which then goes to your MIDI module. However, of course, MIDI is just, it's basically like a digital music score. It's not actually music, so for sound effects, those actually still come out of the X68000. Meaning what you need to do is down the back there's the normal speaker output, so then you need to plug something in there, and that's where you're going to get your sound effects from. But of course now you've got your music going to the synthesizer and your sound effects coming out a different one, and if you're going to just have one speaker system, then you need to use a mixer. I just have my cheap little mixer that's, it's got mic inputs, but I'm not really using those currently. But essentially this is the sound effects from the X68000, and then this is coming from the MIDI mod, and then I control the levels so I can have the music and the sound effects, like if I want the sound effects louder. And you pretty much do have to rebalance it for every game so far. But still, it's kind of part of the fun. And then these are the outputs, which you can then send them to whatever. Preferably a good amp with a good stereo system. So, as you can tell, you need a shitload of cables. Because you got, cables coming from there, cables going to the synth, coming out of the synth, and then going to your speakers. Not to mention, a shitload of power bricks, because the module is a power brick. The mixer is a power brick. The computer's got a power brick. Not to mention, back in the day, this would have been an extremely expensive setup. But I don't know. And then finally, one other thing to show you. Originally, see, I never really, for a long time I've been looking for a good speaker setup. Like, I thought about just getting some, like, Logitech computer speakers or something, which would sound fine. But I wanted something that I could easily hook up, like, lots of stuff to, like my old record player, whatever. And I don't know, I just couldn't find anything, what can I say, I either found stuff that was too cheap or too big. Like, all the good stuff that I could afford was just huge, or, But finally, when I was at Hard Off today, I turned around and found this beast. Hell yes. When I saw this, it was love at first sight. This is a classic Ghetto Blaster boombox, and in fact, this is the National RX 5400 FM AM FM stereo. Yes, this actually differentiates between FM mono and FM stereo. I looked it up online. This baby was released in 1978. True classic. And it's 100% working. I mean, look at the freaking antenna on this beast. It's fucking huge. It's got to be at least 4 feet tall. And if you're wondering, this thing can run on batteries, and it takes 8D. Weighs about 10 pounds without batteries, but 8D cells in there. Probably break your shoulder trying to lug this thing around. So I'm tempted to do that one day outside just for the hell of it. Though I don't have any tapes. But yeah, this thing is a beast. This thing was like, well, I paid 3,000 yen for it, so that's like 35 US. And I mean, it's a little beat up in places, but something like this just gives it character. But other than that, it works 100%. And it also has line in, line out, and even mic. This thing even has dual mic in, so you can put it on your shoulder, put a mic in your hand, and go around rapping, I guess. But yeah, so essentially how it works, everything ends up going to the mixer, and then I've got the mixer to the stereo, which serves as my amp, and music out. So I can't really blast this sucker yet, because it's, you know, like 2 in the morning, and I got home at like 9, so I can't really see how well she does, but before I was just plugging it into the TV, and man, it's a massive improvement. I'm in love with this beast. She's just, sounds great. But for a quick example, I've got Caret loaded up. So right now, I've got it on the internal FM. So of course, you're not going to get the full effect, but this is the original FM sound chip. It actually sounds pretty good by itself. Yeah, that actually sounds pretty cool as it is, but this game is great music. And now we'll switch over. I mean, some games like Castlevania, the 3 soundtracks sound very, very different from each other. But this one, it's pretty much the same soundtrack, just in much higher quality. So switch to the MIDI. Has to load. Music mode. Here we go. I'm going to download for the neighbors. Gotta tighten my antenna. But as you can tell, so this is going through the MIDI. So you get the more realistic instruments. I mean, honestly, I like them both. But, if you really want to hear everything your X68000 collection has to offer and hear all the variations of the different soundtracks, some of them are really different, you really got to get a good MIDI setup. Which, I'm going to be honest, is not cheap. Being in Japan, I can get this stuff cheaper. Like my CM500, this was 2,000 yen in hard off, which was like one of the lucky finds of the century. On eBay, I think these usually start at like $200, but I mean, it's either that or a stack of synthesizers if you want to hear every possible variation accurately. I mean, most people just get like an SC88 or anything that supports GS. You can use the SC55, but if you want all the variations like the MT32, the CM64, the CM500 is probably the best bang for the buck. But yeah, I'll probably do some real sound recordings, like some comparisons. Like some of the Konami ones are really nice, like Gradius 2 and Nemesis 90 Kai, Castlevania, of course. God, this thing's beautiful, man. Man, there's just something great about like late 70s, early 80s stereo equipment. Not only does it look awesome, but this thing is, you know, it's from 78. It's extremely old, and it still sounds way to hell better than... Honestly, I think this is the best sounding stereo I've ever owned. And it's got line in, so I can use it with anything. But anyway, I think there's a certain point in every person's life when they just realize that they've kind of jumped over the bridge. They've lost part of their mind and there's no going back. And I think that's today. So I've got my X68000 computer, a million chords, MIDI module to the beastly boombox. Like, at this point, there's no place to go but up. Either way, look forward to some actual MIDI recordings now that I finally have a full setup. And if you got any questions, let me know. See you next time.